Let me paint you a picture of what the warm-up for an Olympic figure skating free skate looks like. The top 6 skaters from the short program have 6 minutes on the ice together before the competition begins. 6 minutes where they all have to share the same surface, avoid each other, run their jump combinations, calm their nerves and prepare their bodies for the most important 4.5 minutes of their lives. In that warm-up at the 2026 Milan Olympics, the other 5 skaters looked exactly like you would expect 5 elite athletes about to compete for an Olympic gold medal to look. Focused. Serious. In their own worlds. Every thought dedicated to the task in front of them. Alysa Liu was photographing her coaches on her phone. Not a quick glance. Actually pointing her phone at her coaches from the ice and taking photos of them like a tourist at a landmark. And then she looked over at her teammate Amber Glenn, who was sitting near the barrier after skating her own brilliant program 2 hours earlier, and gave her a thumbs up in the middle of her warm-up. 60 seconds before she took the ice for the biggest skate of her life, she gave her coaches a high five. And then she skated. And smiled through every jump. And pointed her finger at the sky at the end. And won. Her coach Phillip DiGuglielmo watched all of this and described it afterward in one sentence that has been shared more times than almost anything else said about her at these games. He said, "The rest of us here would be like, oh my God, I'm nervous, I can't do this, I have a million voices in my head." She has one voice in her head and it says, "I got this." One voice. That is it. That is the whole psychological portrait of one of the most decorated American figure skaters in history in 11 words. And the most important thing about that one voice is that she did not come into the world with it. She built it. Piece by piece, from the wreckage of a childhood that tried very hard to fill her head. With a million voices instead. To understand the one voice you have to understand what was in her head before it. Alysa Liu has ADHD. She has spoken about it in the context of her skating career and what it took to manage it productively. ADHD is not simply an inability to focus. It is a different relationship with attention entirely. For some people it means hyper-focusing on the things that genuinely interest them while struggling to engage with things that do not. For others it means a mind that moves fast in multiple directions at the same time, generating noise and distraction and the specific anxiety that comes from not being able to slow the internal monologue down to a manageable pace. For a figure skater, that kind of mind in competition is either a gift or a disaster depending entirely on what you do with it. If the noise is fear and doubt and the weight of other people's expectations, it costs you. If the noise is channeled and redirected into something else, it becomes an engine. Her coaches, Phillip DiGuglielmo and Massimo Scali, have described their approach to working with her as requiring a completely different relationship than the one they had with previous skaters. DiGuglielmo said they are empaths. They have to read her constantly. There is no one-size-fits-all training session with Alysa. Some days she needs to push through. Some days she needs to back off. And the art of coaching her is understanding which day it is before she does. That kind of individualized support, coaches who actually pay attention to what she needs rather than running a standard program, is one of the structural reasons the comeback worked when the first career did not. She was not just a different person when she came back. She had a different team around her. One that understood the specific brain they were working with. But the deeper reason the one voice exists has nothing to do with coaching. It has to do with what she did during the 2 years she was away from skating entirely. When she retired at 16, she was not just burned out. She had PTSD. Her father used that specific word in an interview after her gold medal, and it is worth taking seriously rather than treating as an exaggeration. She avoided ice rinks. Completely. Not I prefer not to go near one. She could not make herself approach one. The places that had defined her entire existence since she was 5 years old had become places her nervous system reacted to as threats. That kind of response does not resolve itself. You cannot think your way out of a trauma response. You have to work through it. She did not describe the specific therapeutic or processing work she did during those 2 years in detail, but the evidence that something genuine happened is in the person who emerged. The girl who went into the retirement was someone who said she was literally just a dress-up doll, who did not pick her own programs or her own costumes, who skated to fulfill a duty she felt to her younger self rather than out of any genuine desire, who described the whole experience as burdensome. The person who came out 2 years later was someone who picked her music and sent it back 15 times before it was right, who designed her own costumes, who told her father calmly and directly that he was no longer part of the team, who said, "If anyone asks me to change my hair, I will quit," who laughed in a warm-up at the Olympics while everyone around her was managing their nerves. That is not the same person who retired. That is a person who spent 2 years building something internally that the first version of her career had been slowly dismantling. She is also studying psychology at UCLA. And this detail is more relevant than it might initially seem. She declared her major in a field that is essentially the study of why human beings think and feel and behave the way they do. Why some people crumble under pressure and some do not. How trauma affects the brain and the body. What the mechanisms of anxiety are and how they can be redirected. Why identity matters so much to mental health and what happens when identity is taken away or never allowed to develop properly. She is not studying this in the abstract. She is studying herself. The kid who experienced the thing she is now reading about in textbooks. The person who went through the clinical depression at 14 and the PTSD at 16 and the identity loss of being controlled for 11 years and the reconstruction that happened afterward. She is literally doing the academic reading to understand what happened to her and what she did about it. That self-awareness does not just live in a classroom. It lives on the ice. It lives in the moment between setting up for a triple Lutz and executing it, when another athlete might feel the voice of doubt and she feels the one voice saying, "I got this." Sports psychologists have a framework for what Alysa Liu does in competition. They call it process focus rather than outcome focus. It is the difference between an athlete who is thinking about the score, the ranking, the medal, the result, and an athlete who is thinking about the next movement, the next landing, the next edge, the feeling of the ice under the blade right now. Most elite athletes struggle their whole careers to achieve reliable process focus. It is genuinely hard. The closer you are to a result that matters enormously, the more the brain wants to calculate and project and anticipate. The bigger the moment, the louder the outcome voices get. Alysa Liu said after winning her gold medal, "The feelings I felt out there were calm, happy, and confident." She drew out each word separately. Calm. Happy. Confident. And then she said, "Of course I had fun. But I have been having fun all the time. Not this time on this particular night. All the time." The process focus is not something she turns on for the Olympics. It is the baseline. The default state. The one voice that says "I got this" is not a mantra she repeats to drown out the others. It is genuinely the only voice that has been allowed to stay. Here is the most concrete piece of evidence that this mindset was built deliberately rather than inherited randomly. During her 6-minute warm-up at the Olympic free skate, she did something that has nothing to do with natural temperament and everything to do with a deliberate choice about where her attention lives. She gave a thumbs up to Amber Glenn. Think about what that requires. Glenn had just skated a brilliant program 2 hours earlier. She was sitting near the barrier, having already given everything she had, watching her teammate prepare to compete. And Alysa, in the middle of warming up for the most important skate of her life, noticed her, looked over at her, and communicated care across the ice. That act of seeing someone else in a moment when every brain cell is supposed to be about you is not an accident. It is the natural expression of a person whose internal environment is calm enough to have room for other people in it. She was not managing anxiety. She was not fighting voices. She had space. And she used it to make her teammate feel seen. That is the one voice at work. Not just in how she skated. In how she showed up for the person next to her while she was doing it. Her coach said when you enjoy doing something you can excel at it. He said she can really show that you can do what you love, do it really well, and win the Olympics. That sentence sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the hardest thing in elite sport. Because the higher the stakes, the more the love of the thing gets buried under the weight of what the thing represents. The medals. The rankings. The sponsor deals. The expectations of coaches and parents and countries and 5.8 million Instagram followers. Most athletes at the Olympics are not doing what they love. They are doing what they have trained for. There is a difference. What you love pulls you forward. What you have trained for can push you, but it can also freeze you. Alysa Liu at the 2026 Olympics was doing what she loved. She has been doing what she loved since she came back in 2024. Not because the stakes were low. The stakes were the highest they could possibly be. But because she had spent 2 years building a version of herself that could hold high stakes and genuine joy at the same time. That is the one voice. That is what it actually is underneath the coach quote and the selfie and the thumbs up and the smile through every jump. It is the sound of a person who did the work. Who went through the hardest version of her own story and came out the other side knowing exactly who she was and what she wanted. Who built a team that understood her brain. Who designed every element of her performance herself so that nothing in it belonged to anyone but her. And when she stood at center ice in Milan with 4.5 minutes between her and a gold medal, the only thing in her head was exactly what it needed to be. I got this. And she did.